Gervonta Davis versus Shakur Stevenson would not be close. Welcome back everyone, this is Breezes with the Fighting Post. Glad to be talking boxing with you all again. With the recent news of negotiations failing for a November fight between Davis and Shakur Stevenson, I wanted to talk a little bit more on why this matchup might not be happening now. Generally speaking, I don't think fighters are afraid to fight one another, but the circumstances have to be right. Whether it's a fighter's purse, venue, a promotional outlet, or perhaps a network distribution deal, a lot of different things prevent fights from happening. With Shakur Stevenson no longer on Top Rank, we thought more than ever now would be the chance to make the fight. Being a free agent would allow Shakur the ability to negotiate with whoever it is he wanted to. Talk of other side of the street is always a big discussion when it comes to fight negotiations. There's no questioning that Shakur Stevenson isn't an elite fighter, but that's not the problem here. The problem with Shakur is his lack of promotion. Shakur hasn't really been able to show that he can sell outside of New Jersey, and this becomes a problem when you're trying to negotiate with a fighter like Gervonta Davis. Davis has headlined cards all over the US, including fights on the West Coast and on the East Coast. Gervonta Davis has shown the ability to sell out no matter where he goes or who he fights against. Hector Luis Garcia versus most people would not do good numbers. And not saying that it did great numbers with Gervonta Davis, but it still made the highest gate that had ever been recorded in the venue in which the fight took place. So we knew that money was always going to be a problem when it came to this fight. Since hearing about Shakur not re-signing with Top Rank over that $15 million deal, a lot of people were left wondering, well, where would he go from here? The front-running promotion has been Matchroom Boxing, with Eddie Hearn always talking about wanting to sign Shakur. I don't think that this fight isn't happening because of promotional deals. On paper, Shakur Stevenson has accomplished much more than Gervonta Davis. Up until recently, Gervonta Davis was a single-weight world champion. Shakur Stevenson, on the other hand, has won a major world title in 3 different weight classes. But as we all know, belts don't really mean anything to the Gervonta Davis camp. So what else does Shakur have to offer? Shakur hasn't shown to be a big pay-per-view star. On Gervonta's side, his team is constantly questioning whether the opponent has anything to offer. Gervonta Davis has faced opponents that had no business being in the ring with him, to be fair. It's now looking like Shakur Stevenson is headed towards a fight versus William Zepeda. And I actually think this matchup is a lot more competitive. You see, up until this point, Shakur Stevenson hasn't really faced any elite fighters. His last 2 outings have been poor to say the least. And while he didn't get touched, he didn't really provide much offense. The problem with boxing in the way that Shakur does is you're not conducing an entertaining fight. Boxing fans are the ones that are paying for these events. A promoter's not going to want to continue promoting a fighter that has no return. Unfortunately, Shakur Stevenson is going through an identity crisis. You see, he wants to be a superstar, but his defensive-focused style is not inspiring to the audience. Casual viewers need a little bit more entertainment, and that's where we all know the money's at. You see, loyal boxing fans are going to watch the fight regardless of who you're fighting. And while I was able to watch the Stevenson versus De Los Santos fight all the way through, a casual boxing fan might not be willing or honestly able to. While it is a sport, there's an entertainment factor that needs to be met. When it comes to Gervonta Davis, he is by far the more entertaining fighter. Even if there's not a lot of action happening, you're constantly on the edge of your seat waiting for the knockout to come. During the Frank Martin fight, Gervonta Davis showed that he's willing to be patient and will hold out until he finds his open opportunity. On the other hand, Shakur Stevenson has shown that if the fighter in front of him has a little bit too much power, he's going to avoid that fighter at all costs. The problem with that is, if you want to build a consistent fan base, you need to entertain them all the way through, regardless of who you're fighting. So it's going to be clear that from a money perspective, Shakur Stevenson is not going to be able to compete with Gervonta Davis. It's also pretty clear that at an entertainment level, Shakur Stevenson is not going to be able to compete with Gervonta Davis. But what about their skills? While Shakur did have a dominant performance against Haratunian, it wasn't an inspiring event. In his last 2 fights with De Los Santos and with Haratunian, Shakur has shown a lack to engage when a fighter has significant power. This further confirms the belief that we all had. If Shakur and Gervonta Davis were ever in the ring, Shakur would run. And that becomes a problem, because if the general boxing public is aware of what your strategy is going to be, and so is the fighter in front of you, there is no incentive to make the fight if it's not an appealing one. Fighters are in this business to make the most amount of money that they possibly could. Yes, legacy is an important factor for most, if not many, of the fighters, but at the end of the day, they still have to be able to feed their families and provide generational wealth for futures to come. Shakur is also not going to be willing to engage in the pocket, and if he does, you know there's going to be something coming back. Shakur even mentioned that Haratunian had a very strong punch. Martin was able to handle what was coming from Arthur, but he wasn't able to handle what was coming from Davis. Shakur Stevenson's strength is also his weakness. We, as well as Gervonta Davis's camp, know how he's going to approach this fight. I used to not be a believer that Gervonta Davis could win this fight based on decision, but at this point, I think he might be able to. The other thing that people tend to not consider here is Gervonta Davis will be the A-side in this fight, and the judges will be favoring him. Even if Shakur Stevenson is able to be a defensive wizard in there, there's no guarantee that the judges will see it the same. If Gervonta Davis is the constant aggressor, the judges might favor him. This fight will most likely take place in Las Vegas, where the crowd and the audience would be in Gervonta Davis's favor. Up until this point, I believe Shakur Stevenson has been the favorite in every single one of his fights. The crowd would be there for Davis, and I don't know if Shakur Stevenson would be able to handle that pressure. On top of the pressure of the physical crowd, he's most likely also going to be an underdog in the fight. And while some fighters enjoy being the underdog, I think Shakur builds confidence knowing that the general population thinks he's going to win a fight. I think should they face Shakur Stevenson would be questioning himself a lot. If he enters the fight against Gervonta Davis with something to prove and tries shooting it out with him, we know that's not going to end well for him. In saying this, Gervonta Davis has seen it all at this point. He's seen a great left hook, he's seen great footwork, he's seen an immense amount of pressure coming forward from a fighter, he's faced counterpunchers, he's faced defensive fighters. On the other hand, Shakur hasn't seen a combination of fighter anything near Gervonta Davis. There will be enough in Gervonta Davis's experience to be able to deal with Shakur Stevenson. But then again, this is all hypothetical because this fight isn't happening anytime soon. But should this fight happen, I don't see Shakur Stevenson winning. With that being said, I'd like to hear more from you guys. Who do you have winning? Do you see this fight happening at all? Thank you all for coming back. I appreciate the time you take to watch these videos. Please make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. I'd like to hear your thoughts on what you think about this fight. As always, thank you for tuning into The Fighting Post. I'll talk to you soon.